Hello chaps and chapettes, how's it going? It's me, Carl Screezeler. I hope you're all well and welcome to this video in defence of a plane that, well, many will call undefendable. A plane that every YouTuber and their mother have placed on the worst planes of World War II list. Not just on the list, but usually topping it. Now this plane is not the best, but it's by no means the worst plane. I've shown in prior videos some of them already, and I've not even started talking about things like the Brada BA-88 yet. Anyway, let's get started talking about the Bolt & Pull Defiant. The Defiant was built as a turret fighter, an idea of a plane that, well, it did not work out, however, at the time. It was not the worst idea. The last major war, of course, the First World War, saw the real use of planes in a combat role, and although single-seater fighters proved pretty superior in a dogfight, the twin-seat fighters with rear gunners proved to be very handy. The thought process was that forward-facing weaponry was flawed, as well you could only fire to the front, and the speed of modern planes was so fast it was going to be impossible to use forward-firing weapons. You wouldn't be able to get on target. It would be nigh impossible. So the idea was make a turret fighter, and that's where the Defiant comes in. Now there were a couple of other prototypes being made, but the Defiant won out the competition. It first flew in 1937. The prototype did not have a turret on it, however. The test plane was fast, agile and good, leading to many orders. Of course, when the turret was placed onto it, the plane was not as fast or as agile, but saying that it still had a Rolls-Royce Merlin pulling it along, meaning that the plane had good enough pace to keep up with twin-engine planes such as the Blenheim. It was lacking against the Hurricane, but it still had fair pace and agility. The Defiant was equipped with the Bolt & Pull hydraulic Type A turret, a license-built turret, somewhat derived and tweaked from the French Firmin, I think it was, the Firmin turret for their bombers. I believe the turret came from that style of plane, although I can't find any records of it, which is really annoying. Anyway, it was equipped with quad 303 machine guns attached to it, giving the plane a fairly heavy amount of firepower for the late 1930s. Now I know you're going to say 303s are not that big, but they still put a lot of lead downwind, and at the time they were still very strong. One downside for the gunner was the cramped space, which meant they had to wear the GQ parachute, aka the Rhino suit, which combined the parachute and life jacket in one uncomfortable package. It wasn't the best parachute either. It was slightly smaller, it was less effective, and as I said, very uncomfortable, but it would save your life if you jumped out of a plane. The gunner also had to turn the turret to the left or right to easily escape. Now that was a bit more of a flaw, as you can imagine when a plane is crashing it's very hard to turn a turret. Sometimes the wind would make it very tricky to turn it. You could lose hydraulic power, you'd have to then do it manually, and this is why quite a few gunners in the Defiant unfortunately lost their lives. Anyway, on to the reason the Defiant is actually not all that bad, and well, we'll get on to that in a moment. Although the Defiant was more than capable of fighting against the enemy, there was a really dark day in its history where 141 Squadron took their Defiants into a daylight action, going against a squadron of BF-110s. They flew to intercept them. The wing were themselves intercepted by a group of BF-109s, where 7 of the 9 Defiants were taken down with a loss of 10 aircrewmen. This action really tainted the Defiant's reputation, unfortunately. This was mainly due to the fact they had no fighter escorts. Now in doctrine, the Defiants should have had a fighter escort with them, either Spitfires or Hurricanes. They didn't have that group with them. The other unfortunate circumstance was actually the antenna of the plane. The Defiant's antenna was underneath. It was an underslung antenna, and when the planes were at low altitude, this meant that they couldn't get their radio messages out, and it proved to be pretty much useless. So this had to be changed, and this is the main reason the Defiant was taken off of frontline duty, because of this big loss moment, and they were relegated to more night fighting action. However, this is a video in defense of the plane, so let's talk about their best day. And what a best day it was. In their first engagement, Defiants took down a Ju-88 and an He-111 over Holland, and then there was the 29th of May. The 29th of May is a special day for the Defiant, as 264 Squadron claimed 37 kills in a single day, taking down 19 Ju-87s, 9 Bf-110s, 8 Bf-109s, and a Ju-88. Nicholas Koch and his air gunner, Albert Lippert, claimed 8 victories, plus 2 shared, an RAF record. A lot of aces in one days came from Defiance. But Defiant itself lists 11th overall in victories for the RAF planes, with 148 total victories in the air, which is a fairly decent bloody record for a plane that's considered to be one of the worst of World War II. One thing the Defiant had going for it in the early days was mistaken identity. The Germans often thought it was a Hurricane, sat on its tail and then got a nasty surprise. However, it was not just luck that got the plane its victories over the enemy fighters. The plane would go into a spiral formation, meaning a group of Defiants would basically not have a blind spot for their gunners. This tactic proved extremely successful. However, it did take time to form up, and the aforementioned losses is the reason why they lost so many planes, because they couldn't form up into their kill circle. It was a little bit of a frustrating system because, obviously you needed to form up. If you couldn't form up, you were almost sitting ducks. Although the plane was withdrawn from daytime operations and frontline duties, the Defiant really started to shine during the Blitz as a night fighter. With an extra set of eyes and the fact they could fly underneath the enemy bombers, the Defiant was a list topper. Now, the pilots often would fly slightly underneath and to the front of the enemy planes, so they could just shoot straight up, and they were also in a blind point for many of the German bombers, and it was a really useful tactic because they absolutely did great things during the Blitz. Once they got the improved Defiant Mark II with a new radar, this only helped the plane in its nighttime interceptor role. As I said, it was many days in the Blitz, it was the highest ranking plane in enemy victories. That really goes to show how good the Defiant was. In 1942, the Defiant was moved off of combat duties as a better aircraft came along. However, the plane still had its use as a target tug, air-sea rescue plane, turret fire training aircraft as well, or possibly the most important role. Defiant found new life as an electronic countermeasure aircraft. Its main job was to counter the Freya radar system used by the Germans. Equipped with the Moonshine, a system that would make it look like 8 Defiants were actually 100 aircraft. This system would cause the Germans to have to move their fighters to try and defend against the incoming 100 aircraft. When they got there, they would find there was no aircraft there at all. It was a fake blip. The system was not perfect and required the Defiants to fly in very close formation, meaning they could really only use it in daytime operations, as nighttime the sort of formation flight they had to use was very tricky to get right. Later, the Mandrel noise jammer was implemented, and would see a Defiant flying off the coastline, and the system would effectively blind the enemy radar, allowing for gaps for the Allied planes to fly through en masse, completely unseen. The Defiant was used in this role until 1943. This was a crucial part of the war. These actions from the Defiant caused more chaos to the Germans than anything else, and it was a really crucial role for the plane. The plane having some fairly good characteristics meant it could generally keep itself out of trouble and keep the radar jamming going. Finally, the Defiant was used up to 1948 as a test bed for ejection seats. Ironic, I guess, considering the gunners had such a hard time escaping the plane to begin with. But the work the plane did for the system saved countless others' lives. As I said, it was operating in this role up until about 1948 and did a lot to actually improve the ejector seat technology, often using dummies to be launched from the plane. In closing, the Defiant was not the best plane of World War II, and I'm not going to argue that one. It was a little bit daft. A turret fighter was an outdated principle, and the plane itself was the wrong evolution for a fighter. But that does not mean it was the worst plane to fly. Heck, it was not even the worst plane the RAF had, let alone in the world. The Defiant often gets needlessly put upon because it was such a strange concept. Because it was not the best looking plane, nor was it the most fancy plane, but by no means was it the worst plane of World War II, and nor the worst fighter. In actuality, it was, it was actually pretty good. The Boulton Paul Defiant was mediocre at worst, and overperformed at best. The amount of aces the plane made shows it had a use. Next time you hear, or see, or find the worst planes of World War II, and the Defiant is on the list, or if it's sitting high on the list, mention to them, it wasn't that bad. Look up, do research on other planes, because there are much worse planes out there. Now, you could argue it was one of the worst planes of the RAF, and yeah, there's argument's sake there. In action, it was not the great, but it was by no means the worst. It had a very, very good use in its life. And, well, if you see them on that list, tell them they're talking out of their tail gunner. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've been working on this for a long time and wanting to get it out quite a lot. I really wanted to get a little bit of a defense of the Defiant video because I feel like it's really put upon, and people always claim it to be the worst plane ever, but they don't do the research. They just see this plane, they look at the dark day, they look at the time where 7 out of 9 planes were lost in a single action, but they don't look at the other side. They don't look at all the victories it had. They don't look at the the use it had in many roles. The Defiant is an abnormality. It is a plane that had its drawbacks. It is by no means the best plane of World War II, but as I said, by no means is it the worst. Alright guys, I'm going to head off now. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share this one around if you like. Until next time, this is me, Carl Screezeler, wishing you all well. Bye bye.